Welcome to Once Upon a Quantum Leap. This is Paul Madar
Capucine Chapman.
and we are going to have a great time on this episode. We have Christine Madar, the reporter, who has given you lots of reports to listen to. We are going to talk about her background, the training, and about sessions, and even delve into the future.
Right. Right. We'll still hear her own, not reporter voice, but just the Christine Madar voice and thoughts and experiences that she's had. And hopefully you'll see an interplay of how the two kind of meld together. So thank you, Christine, for being our guest. And you're going to love this one.
Stay tuned.
Hello, Paul.
Hello, Capucine.
I'm so excited that we're going to start another series of episodes. And I'm going to say back by popular demand, because if you've been following our episodes and listening to the intuitive reports, you've heard a voice on those intuitive reports. And that voice belongs to none other than Christine Madar, who also happens to be your beloved wife. But she's our first guest to help us understand on another level that you and I don't have that much experience with, or if any at all, about what it means to be a reporter, how she became a reporter. And then, of course, she's much more than that. But we've got Christine that's going to be here chit-chatting with us and opening our minds to a lot more stuff. Paul, say hello.
This is awesome because she's the most natural first guest on this show because we keep referring to all these reports and it's the voice. So now it's going to sound different because you'll find, and we're going to ask her about this as well. The voice of a reporter sounds a little bit different than your normal daily speaking voice. So with that teaser, let's introduce Christine Madar. Ta-da! There you are.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, people.
Hello, podcast world. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice to be here.
We have a bunch of questions in line for you, but we're going to jump around with different questions because we're curious about your side of things, your perspective on things. And we know that our listeners are going to be curious to talk kind of in a surrogate sort of way, talk with an actual intuitive reporter. So first question really is, what brought you to this mystical side of life? Let's enter like when you first discovered the mystical side of life.
I'd have to say that it really had to do with my father, who was an astronomer. He taught in a planetarium and he taught high school. But my dad taught me to look into the starry night as early as I can remember. In fact, there's a family story about me like being under the age of 2 and running into their bedroom, mom and dad's bedroom, to look at the full moon and looking up into the sky and falling off the bed.
Perfect.
So, I think a lot of it was just my dad had a very, a really expanded consciousness into the whole universe. So I grew up doing that. And then I think for a lot of us, you're just kind of born with a certain trajectory. I had dreams when I was younger that had elements of precognition to them that were not like earth-shattering, but it was things like dreaming about a mall in Iowa City, Iowa, that we drove through on our way to Pennsylvania 6 weeks later. I didn't live in Iowa City. I don't think I've even ever been back to Iowa City. Yeah. So it was precognitive in that way. And those kinds of things were when you have a deja vu experience or a kind of quantum experience like that, there's a felt experience in your body that is not anybody else's. You can't, often you can't even put it into words, but
Mhm.
you just sense that there's something right about it or something familiar.
Yeah.
And I had those through the years. And then, I was a teenager in the 80s when Shirley MacLaine published her book Out on a Limb, and her groundbreaking television show it was a movie, I guess, a TV
Yeah.
movie about that was on. I
I
missed it.
remember it. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you missed a television show, then you didn't get to rewind it and see it. So I've never even
Right.
seen it, but a friend of mine did. And so we started, I read the book. We started getting interested in astral projection. We would go up into the Colorado mountains on Friday nights and lay in the back of her truck and look into the stars and try to astral project,
Wow.
Yeah, so it was very innocent. It was before there was so much information available, where there is that overload. And one of the things I appreciate about the simplicity of that evolution in my life is that when I did come across the intuitive reports and received one, there was a purity to it because I wasn't inundated with a bunch of other information. And the first intuitive report I received, actually, I guess it was a past life profile. But again, it was that felt sense where somebody that I didn't know, two people that I didn't know ever, I'd never met them. I knew they didn't know me. Suddenly they were describing me without it being personal, but it was like a kind of it was universal and it was personal. I don't really know how else to put it.
Mhm.
And there were things that I could sense in myself that were accurate that helped me understand myself. And then after receiving a few reports, then I got it in my head. It wasn't really in my head. I think it was really more an inner urge to that I wanted to know if I could be an intuitive reporter.
Mm.
And intuitive reports are different than past life regressions. I was curious about regressions, but I wasn't really finding anybody that could lead me through a regression. I had friends try to do it, but it was it was obviously all in my head. I could tell the difference. This is kind of a long story, but it really is how I became an intuitive reporter. I was living in Boulder, Colorado, and I was attending massage school, and I kept thinking about intuitive reports. And one day I went to the public library, not really knowing why. There was no reason for me to go there, but I was wandering around and I was walking down a section of the library that had nothing to do with self-awareness, esoteric information, nothing. There was a book that had come from a different part of the library that was sitting on the shelf. And that book was called Autobiography of a Skeptic. And it was written by one of the founding board members of the School of Metaphysics. It was his journey in the 60s and 70s with intuitive reports and how he came into it as a skeptic. And I had heard about the book, but I'd never read it. And I thought, that's synchronicity.
Mhm.
So I took the book home. I read it like in one night. And I just sat there, and I remember it was in the evening, and I could see the Flatirons in Boulder, which are iconic part of the mountains. I could see them out my window. And I just kept saying in my head, I was like, I want to do it. Can I do it? I'm going to think about it if I don't try. it was a very profound, like, moment of epiphany for me.
Yeah.
I was not part of the School of Metaphysics. There were no school branches in Colorado anymore at that time. There was nothing that made sense about it, other than it was such a strong felt sense that I needed to try. And the sun went down, and I was sitting in the dark.
Wow. Wow.
And finally, I just came to an agreement with myself. And I just was like, I need to try. And either I'll be able to do it or I won't.
Hmm.
And then I can move on. And then that set off a sequence of events.
Man, that's a great story of destiny. Just destiny plopping right in front of you. And then, but also a story of that you still have choice to move in the direction of this urge or deny this. So you still have that the free will to choose it or not choose it. And we've talked about that in other episodes too.
I can say
I
that
also, go ahead.
years later, the person that I worked with as my conductor asked to look at my astrology chart, and there was something he was looking for. I don't remember what it was, but it had to do with a planet in a certain sign being retrograde, which I have. And he said his only comment was, "Oh, yeah, that makes a good intuitive reporter."
Hmm.
And I've known in my time a lot of people that practiced to be intuitive reporters, and it just didn't work out for them. And then some that did. And I've never done any kind of like cross referencing to see if they have the same placement, but I did make a mental note of it and thought, well, I guess I was cooperating with what I arrived with in this lifetime.
Yeah.
You mentioned you said it, I came into an agreement with myself about, tell me about, like, have you always had that sense of whatever direction of interest or inquiry or research you're going to do? It sounds like you've at an early age in your life, you've always had this, made an agreement with myself after after whatever it's been, you've processed it a bit, but it's almost like comes a time when you've made a commitment to something and you follow through with it. How does that play out in being an intuitive reporter, or does it?
I think it really more applies to life.
Yeah.
Where I really believe that our authority is in our body. I've learned it over the years. And although it might sound, what I'll say is that when I am in agreement with myself and I have that and I follow through, it works out really well. When I'm in agreement with myself and I second guess and I don't follow through, it doesn't work out as well. So I've had a few times in my life where what I'm describing played out. And that was one of them. I mean, I really do call that an epiphany. That was it wasn't just insight. It was a lot of things coming together at that moment in time where I just decided to try. And I had no idea. I mean, that was in 1992. And it was 1996, actually, when I started training. So that was a good 4 years later.
Yeah. Well, it seems like, because I also know a little bit about your educational background, and not just the educational background, but the background of all of your interests of research. Tell us a little bit more about that. Like what your course of studies were, and Tibetan cranial massage. I mean, you've done a lot of, you've dived in deeply.
And keeps on
Yeah,
studying all kinds of
right, I
things.
do.
Yeah. It's always something.
I think the connecting link is that part of me that longs to understand And it's not just through the head. I mean, I've had to grow into this. It really is through the whole person. So really any kind of pattern that I can explore, or system, that might be a better way, whether it's astrology, whether it's numerology, whether it's gene keys, whether it's human design, whether it's body work, whether it's Tibetan cranial, whether it's intuitive reports, whether it's traveling to different cultures, being in Australia and being around people that live in the dream time, that has been, the part of the Aboriginal existence
Right.
for 50,000 years.
Right.
When you are in the presence of that, your nervous system changes.
Mm-hmm.
It just does. And I'm very, very, very curious. And I'm also extremely, I would say probably one of the things that lights me up the most is the mystery of life.
Mm.
It's like when I get out of sorts, or, when I forget about that, it's very heavy. Day-to-day life is very heavy to me. When I tune into it again, I feel like I'm lifting into the stars, the starry firmament of all of existence.
Mm.
And suddenly everything's okay. Everything has a place. Every person has a place. The physical world and its trials and tribulations are temporary. The suffering is part of the mystery. And I kind of, I'm not really built to solve the mystery. There are people that are. And I really love being around those people. Because I learned a lot from them. But it's more that I'm built to tune into it and to remember it. And I am aware that when I bring that in to a conversation or an environment or some kind of communication, that how other people kind of have a remembering in themselves of their own connection to the quantum field or the mystery.
Yeah, you can invite them in with that.
Right. And again, it's like, I'm not here to, I really don't solve the mystery, but boy, do I love the mystery of existence.
Yeah.
I chose anthropology, which is in my undergraduate work. And that's an unending exploration of the mystery of culture and people. And if you want to get into, I can remember writing a paper in one of my freshman classes. It was a class called, oh Lord, I'm not going to remember the name of the class. Ethics, the morality of war. That's what it was. It's a good liberal arts class.
There you go.
And my final paper, I wrote about reincarnation and the influence of that in morality in war. And I mean, this is way back. This is 1986. So again, I guess I want to emphasize that there just wasn't that much. There was not an overload of information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My professors were good old-time professors, had been teaching for like 50 years, and they were skeptics. But they, they acknowledged that it was an interesting perspective.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I can't remember how I ended up there, but
Well, I know it all started with your that you came into an agreement with yourself and how you said that
yeah.
that became
In your educational background.
in your educational background, and then how that's just always you evolved into just being one with your body, responding to it and listening to where it needs to take you. So with that listening, do you remember anything about either your first report that you had that kind of triggered or sparked something? And if not that, maybe other reports that have been little pivotal pockets for
health
you.
analysis that I had, which I value the intuitive reports I received a great deal. I've used them. I have them in a folder. I take care of them. I reference them. And I can say that if all I ever had received was my first health analysis, everything that I need in that still is in that report. And it's interesting. It's an interesting journey. The first line said that I was like a chameleon in that I changed myself according to my environment, and that it was a strength and a weakness, and it was producing loneliness. And that has been a lifelong at first I was like, I don't even understand this. But what I did understand was the loneliness, that there was a deep, deep loneliness. And at the time I was, had been in a relationship for 4 years and living with somebody, and he read the report and he didn't even recognize it. He said, that doesn't sound like you. And I was like, oh, but that is me inside. Like I never could. I just lived with it is really what it was. I adapted to that feeling of loneliness. And I went on with my life. And later I wrote a paper about that very thing, that I didn't look lonely to other people. I didn't act lonely. But I felt it. And that intuitive report articulated that the loneliness was coming from how I was separate from my inner self.
Wow.
Which I think is a universal, I would say it is a universal journey of growing up.
Yeah, I would agree.
Where, you're born, you go through the first 7 cycles of life. I was 22 at the time I received the report, just finishing that third 7-year cycle. And I was not in an environment when I was growing up that incorporated prayer or meditation or even much self-reflection. I grew up in a super fun house. We were not a fun house, but it was fun. We had a lot of humor. We traveled a lot. There was a lot of lightheartedness in the house and superficiality in that. But, with as I've talked about, that interest in the mystery of life, I needed something deeper. And so what the loneliness I've come to understand, and I don't feel it anymore. That has healed in me.
Wow.
But it was a way to become aware of that separation in myself. And
to give it a name.
Intuitive report. Yeah. I mean, it still amazes me. It's like, gosh, I'm 22. I was 22 when I got that. And I applied little bits and pieces of it. And, it's like 30 years later, I guess, 31 years later, I can see the progress.
Yeah.
I can still see the patterns, where I want to change myself according to the environment. That I definitely know that I adapted. I cultivated that when I was in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, because I was in different schools for those years. My family moved for my father's education. And you know what? When you're in 7th grade and you're in a new school, in a new state, in a new city, for me, I just changed to what the people were like around me so I could be accepted.
Yeah. It's a survival tactic.
Kind of. Man, that was a doozy.
Yeah.
But, it's not a blame thing. Now I see all of that was setting me up for me to get focused on what my karmic learning is.
Yeah. And trigger that self-awareness, the quest for self-awareness in you. Yeah.
Was there I know you said something there about how that initial report, it resonated with you, and it still resonates with you, and it could be the one that has stayed with you. I like to call reports like that. I just call it like it's the homework that you're going to get for the rest of your life.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're a really good student at kind of elevating it and placing it where it needs to be placed. So that for me just tells me a lot about that inner urge that you also spoke of earlier. That just it just kept working with you all the time. It was this little silent little nudge that was like, yeah, I remember this quality. And how does this pattern play out in your everyday life? You were just constantly courting it. You were nurturing it. You were aware of it. And I imagine sometimes you ignored it and, then it would resurface, right?
Yeah, I'm remembering this now. Paul, I don't think you even know this story. I lost the cassette tape that this was on, and I had not
yeah, you told me
transcribed
that.
it.
Yeah.
I lost it, and I was like, where did it go? And I lost it for a few years, and then found it in the back of a closet at my parents' house that I had moved away from. I don't even know. I don't know what I was thinking. But I remember having enough awareness to think there was a lesson in the fact that I had lost it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found it again.
Yeah.
So it's not like it has taken a while, and I think this is true for everybody, that when there's that resonance with a deep karmic lesson, it's not common that everything unfolds in a nice, even path from that point. What is common is that, like, you can dive into it for a little while, and then you have to step back and integrate. And then you can come into it. And when you do, you see it from a different perspective. Right. I know all three of us have had the experience where we've had intuitive reports and set them aside and do other things and go back to that report. And you read through it and you're like, that line was not in this report before.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
I never saw that before. And that's the richness of the reports. And I would say one of the things I value the most, because the perspective of the information is from the subconscious mind. So there's a succinctness to the information that bypasses the chatter of the conscious mind. Like, it's taking me, who knows, 10 minutes to say what in an intuitive report might be.
Yeah, there's a percent.
We've talked
about this where there's a
loneliness.
Yeah, we've talked about this, that there's a precision to
Yes,
the
that's the
phrasing of reports very often, and there's just the right word, and it's just said just the right way, that it's timeless, it's universal, and it's also personal, all at the same time.
Let's dive into that. Like, what can you tell us about the training process?
Tell us. That talking about it is going to sound pretty boring.
It is boring, actually.
And honestly, that was one of the things that I had to come to terms with my own conscious mind, because I didn't know how reports were done. I knew nothing about it. I just was fascinated with what mine had said. And so I had imagined that, like, I've got a conductor and I go into a certain state of mind, and it's like I can see everything. And I get to journey, and then I wake up and then I remember it. And I just kind of didn't know that part about not remembering it.
Whoops.
And it was like, wow, that sounds really boring to me. So I got over it. Because I could listen to lots of other reports. There are other ways to fulfill it. But the training of it had to do with practicing and cultivating undivided attention and concentration, so that I had a sense of control with my attention and awareness. Because the thing that is unique about these intuitive reports is where the reporter's attention is when the information is provided. So my awareness needs to move into the inner levels. That's a personal thing that seems like a lot of jargon. If you study, if you meditate, you've had some experience with it. There are, yeah. So I had to learn and practice enough so that I could move my awareness and attention to the same place in this pattern. which would be following the conductor,
Mhm.
and then stay there.
Would you say that's why some reporters like didn't make it? They started the training and then they kind of fizzled out and or
Yeah,
left, or they
yeah,
weren't able to keep their attention in the place where they needed to keep it.
right. And there's a process, because it is so true that I do not remember. I don't remember, and it's a very odd experience when I interact with people, as Capucine said at the opening, that recognize my voice, that feel deeply touched by the intuitive reports that we've offered, and think that I remember.
Yeah.
It's like I've certainly learned to be graceful over the years, and I listen to what they have to say, and then I just have to say, I'm glad that helped.
Right.
I don't remember.
Right.
Now, that process of not remembering, for me, and the way that I know that it was guided with other intuitive reporters, was just 100% discipline. When I was first practicing, I would not think about anything that I might have remembered at the beginning, where things are sort of in between worlds, or
Mhm.
things like that. I don't know. I mean, I'm very curious, but there was something about my devotion to um, the lineage that I was in.
Yeah. And the purity of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that and I still, I mean, when Paul and I do a set, as it's concluded, I mean, it might be kind of humorous to him. I don't know from the conductor's part, but I come back into a more of a waking state, and I'm like, did we get cat food? Do we need to get
Yeah,
cat food? Do we
exactly.
need to do,
Yeah.
which, um, especially if I'm with people and I've done the reports for them, I don't start talking about cat food. I'm quiet because they've obviously been touched, but I'm not there. Like, I
Yeah.
could literally leave the room and it wouldn't matter. They could talk things out with Paul.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a weird experience, and I'm sure you've had this, where you come back from a series of reports, you open your eyes, and someone is crying in front of you because they've just received this really profound report, and you know nothing about it.
Yeah,
And like,
yeah.
are you okay? Is
Yeah.
it was
Well,
this a
and
is this a
I
good
know that,
thing?
and that is because it is, and I have said this to you multiple times, and you are very gracious when you receive the compliment. Um, but you are, I mean, there's just a way that how you deliver the reports, the oration of it, the words, it's just, it has a different ring to it than, it just has a uniqueness to it. So again, I will give you that compliment, and I'll move on from complimenting you way too much about that
Yeah, we
anymore.
get uncomfortable with
I
compliments.
know. But
Yeah.
I will say though, I think because there's a reason why there's a level of, maybe protection is not the word, but um, there's a reason why the training is set up in the way that it is, and that it really is for a devoted person to do all of the things that are required to do it in the way that it needs to be done.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah.
so,
Well, I'll
There is
say
a
from a
difference
conductor.
between psychic information and intuitive information.
yeah.
Yeah.
And knowing the difference is more important now than it was 30 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, it's been an interesting journey to have been part of this for so many decades, where it was much more unique in the early days. And the first intuitive reports uh, at the School of Metaphysics were done in 1968. Year I was born, so I know how many years it's been, 56.
Mhm.
That's half a century.
Right.
Um, there are a lot of people now, and I think this is part of the natural evolution, as part of humanity waking up. Um, and this is not just in psychic intuitive stuff, this is like across the board where people get just a little bit of information. This is across life in general, a little bit, and they think they're an authority.
Right.
And then they're presenting themselves as an authority, and people that aren't paying attention to the source of that information are just like going along with the ride. And they're pretty far away from the point of origin, the source information. I value that source information because that gets me closer to the mystery.
Right.
And it's an interesting journey right now for a younger generation of people that are growing up to know what the difference is. We have a daughter who's 20, who's in college, and bless her heart, she's taken anthropology classes. So I love that. Her professor had her write a paper about where she had to cite source information. And so it was very valuable for her to be able to even see how many layers there can be.
Right.
So, I am secure in the foundation of what we offer. And I am observant of what I see, particularly on social media, and what the source is of what's being offered.
I think you and I are very similar in that regard. As I like you, I will listen to, and it doesn't. There was a certain line in the movie Men in Black where I think it was one of the first movies where Tommy Lee Jones' character was picking up one of those little trash magazines. This is in the movie.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if you remember this, but something to the effect of, why are you picking up this? Well, this is where you find information. You never know where you find it.
Yeah.
So I'm on the one end of I'm open to all forms of information because there's always going to be a glimmer of something, a nugget. But not all of it is going to be as rich and as full. But it's going to give you a nugget of something, and depending on how you listen to it, where you are in your life, maybe you'll travel down a place that may take you a little bit longer to loop back and say, well, maybe I really need a little bit more richness.
I think these days also there's the difference between something ringing true because you've already been exposed to it, that confirmation bias, versus something ringing true because of its authenticity, its deep-rooted authenticity and its source. And I think I agree that people are having a hard time telling the difference right now between those two.
How do you personally keep your training practices? I know you spoke a little bit about the different areas of interest you follow, but are there other certain disciplines you still do too?
It's part of me at this point to spend some time every day in an inward contemplation. I know that as I invest in my own growth and development and increasing self-honesty, because, it's like as I continue to clear whatever clouds are in me, whatever blocks, whatever misunderstandings, whatever prejudices, opinions, that helps.
Yeah.
It helps all parts of life, and it helps the intuitive reports.
Right.
I also am much better at calming my nervous system now, much better at releasing what doesn't serve me, which sounds really jargony, because everybody has that. And it's not about just releasing what doesn't serve me. You don't just let it go. As we all know, things stick to us. You've got a grudge, you've got something, somebody in your life you haven't forgiven. But it's like loosening the knots that are in you
Mhm.
And every single day, it's just because I just so much love to wake up. I love the process of waking up. Let's say, I love the benefit of waking up.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love the new perspective. The process can be uncomfortable, you know,
Well,
Right.
yeah.
I will say as a conductor that this process that you talk about of studying, like in this case, gene keys or human design or these different systems and modalities,
Mhm.
contemplation, but also that working on yourself, what that does is it creates pathways in the mind. It all of these
Mhm.
systems that you're like installing, these programs that you're installing, they create pathways that then can be utilized with the intuitive reports. So information can find its way through these pathways that you create. And anytime you come to a resolution or you let something go in your life or there's forgiveness, that's another pathway that is that is established that then can be expressed through, and there can be an expression about that pathway. So there's constant what you do is amazing because you constantly create these pathways for different ways to express a thought or different ways to express um, a system or a suggestion for someone. So keep doing that.
Well,
Yeah, please
something
keep
that I will
going.
say that I have really only the only other people that I feel like um, I know they understand this experience are people that have been intuitive reporters for a long time. As you as you go through the experience of giving intuitive reports, you're opening and your pathways into your own mind and into universal mind. That is also a benefit in waking life.
Mhm.
And so what happens is like I have access to intuitive information that I really would not have had before because I've kind of got these pathways. Like often when I'm with somebody, I'll start talking about something that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. And I'll even kind of watch myself and I'll be like, why are you talking so much? Why are you talking about that? And I just keep talking about it. And in a short amount of time, there's a connection made where they'll just like, okay, quick instance of this. I do a type of body work, Tibetan cranial, that's very helpful when people have had concussions. I just recently was talking with a woman that I worked with. I've worked with her for a year and a half. I've never talked to her about concussions. I've never talked to her about Tibetan, nothing. Suddenly, I'm just doing this about concussions and Tibetan cranial. And I even say, if you ever get a concussion, please contact me. It had nothing to do with the moment, the context of the moment. And yet, what came out of that is that she's had two severe concussions, and she needs the work. Now, I I have learned that kind of thing happens, and with me, and I attribute it partly to being an intuitive reporter. Because I'm just with people, it's like my mind reaches out to them, and then suddenly it's being interpreted and I'm saying it.
Mhm.
But again, it's not succinct. It's
Mhm.
not, it's like rambling and we get there. But there's pathways into my mind that have been built that I do appreciate.
Yeah.
It helps me both move in and out.
Part of the training of the reporter is to give suggestions. I mean, that's every report ever is to take a look and give some suggestions.
Right.
And so that pathway becomes very well traveled for the intuitive reporter. So in your waking life, I would think that you just naturally are able to give clear suggestions for people. Just
Yeah, and
being
sometimes it
able to
kind of comes out
detect.
backwards. Like I'm talking about the solution without knowing what the connection is.
Yeah.
And that's really just kind of a minor, more intriguing thing that I follow with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But
With
yes, I do love learning about myself, and I love patterns that are universally applicable, like the gene keys. Capucine and Paul know.
I
Mhm.
know, right? Well, I'm gonna slip us into maybe something that's so basic, but maybe a little boring, but I think it's important to note or to address what makes for a good conductor. What, and maybe Paul, you can answer this because I know we touched upon this in one of our first episodes
Mhm.
about what is a report, how do reports occur? What's the relationship between you guys? But can we reframe again? How do you actually go about doing it? Like how do you do it? What's the sitting situation? Yeah, all
Yeah.
blah blah
Like, what
stuff.
does it
It's
look like? And
what does it
yeah.
look like? The whole
Yeah, we
thing.
haven't actually touched on that since
Yeah.
probably the first or second
Yes, we probably should
episode.
refresh that, but also dovetail with what does make for a good conductor and the relationship between you and the reporter, also known as Paul and Christine.
Mhm. The scene of actual giving reports, the commonality is that we really stress the objectivity of the reporter. So that's why there's a conductor in the first place. So the conductor is the one who stays awake and runs the recorder and interfaces with the person who's asking reports or reads from a printout of a report that's been sent in, a request, and presses buttons, and but also does the guidance for the reporter to like point them in the right direction, and also be a secure buffer surrounding them. So there's
So when you say points them in the right direction,
to
again,
into the inner levels and give
there
the
you go.
commands. There's very specific commands of go to this inner level, go to the third level of consciousness or the fourth level, or um, and then there's an ushering kind of thing that the conductor does without, revealing too much of what goes on. And then we're sitting next to each other, and there's actually the conductor puts their hand on the forehead of the reporter. And this is straight out of Edgar Casey's material. He used to do this for himself. He used to play the part of his own conductor, and he would put his own hand on his own head, and he would recline a little ways back, and then he would hop into that trance state and start giving suggestions and tuning into someone. And he had a stenographer with him, and then usually there was somebody giving questions and posing questions to him, but he would put himself in that state. So the conductor nowadays is the one who assists the reporter moving into that state of readiness for questions. As far as what the reporter does in that process, I'm not so clear on that. What your experience? I know you go
Well,
to a place, right?
my
There's like a,
job, first of all, you want to have a comfortable chair because you're
yeah,
sitting in a position.
sometimes for a long time. Yeah,
It's misleading to say that I go to sleep.
right.
It's not like falling asleep. Um, but I'm also not aware of my body. So really the process is to remove my attention from my physical body and physical surroundings. It's like a drawing in.
Yeah.
And there is I guess it's a location that's not rooted, it's not physical, for me to focus my attention and awareness.
Mhm.
Learning about that is really part of the training I'm not going to say any more about that right now because
No,
Yeah.
there's no need
there's
unless
no,
we're
Unless you're in the
training.
training.
that's right.
Yeah.
It's not necessary.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then listening to the conductor's voice, there's just over time, it really is like being trained. Like it just, I'm trained. It's like I hear the voice, I hear this, I hear that, and I just can easily access the state of mind that I am in to offer the reports. And then when it's done, when we're done, there's a bookend to it. There's commands, there's, start your deep breathing, start this, and a slowly coming back into the conscious awareness.
Mhm.
My experience with offering the reports is that at the end, when I've completed a set, I feel very peaceful, very still, very centered, very quiet. That is like a deep meditation. It's not the same as a good night, a deep night of sleep. It's not the same, but it's a deep meditation or a deep journey, where time has passed, although it doesn't seem like it. That's odd. My voice was used, information was offered, but it's like, for me, it's like I went from, and sometimes I might not be immediately calm or whatever, there are stresses in life. You sit down and it's like I go from that to deeply relaxed, and it feels like no time has passed. So I find it very beneficial. There's a benefit.
Yeah.
That is a benefit.
And then there's a deep trust between you and the conductor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If the conductor's attention wanders, it is very difficult.
Yeah.
I
We
mean,
also found that technology often interferes. Like the more contraptions like cameras and computers and rigging up a live streaming this and that, we found that it does tend to distract everybody.
well,
It
it does
distracts
for us,
yeah.
and that may be because we're old school.
Yeah, right.
Like I
Maybe, yeah.
remember the phone on the wall,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And
Right.
I just, we offered it, and sometimes we will still offer a Zoom session. But I was sensitive to the electromagnetic effect.
Mhm.
That was a distraction for me. It was like, no, now there's another layer to try to
Block or to
get through or something.
Right.
So
on
part
multiple,
of the source, staying true to the source.
and so with that, if I ask this question, will a person receive a similar report when done by different reporters or multiple reporters? So I was always
experience is that yes, the universal part of it, the universal information, is similar. Is it relayed in this exactly same way with the same words? No.
Yeah.
I have a great story about that. There was one point where a conductor and reporter gave a report. It was a past life report for someone, and it turned out that the recording button wasn't pressed for the whole report. It was just non-existent. And we just went, oh my God. Okay, so
do it again.
But the reporter that gave the report was needed to go do something else. So the next day, I think it was the next day, maybe 2 days later, another reporter was tasked to redo that report. they didn't talk to each other at all, or plan this or anything like that. And by golly, she gave exactly the same, lifetime was honed in on exactly the same report. And yes, it was phrased a little bit differently, but the significance was the same. I was in both of those sessions listening and observing, and I thought that was just the coolest thing, that they
Wow.
both honed in
Wow.
on exactly the same Akashic record, exactly the same significance relayed. And that was confirmation for me of the process and the training and the purity of this system.
Right. Yeah. Are there other surprising reports, yours or from others, favorite reports, funny, poignant, anything like that? Any notable reports?
How esoteric do you want to get?
Anyway, wherever you,
Because I could talk about
Atlantean
our
reports.
family
Yeah.
report.
yes.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about our family report, Paul, or should we save that for a different?
We we can
Our
talk.
family,
That
like
was
you
a
and
little
me and the
hard to,
girls.
it was hard to at first to digest that and
Yeah.
decipher. It was so esoteric. Yeah. But it was cool. It was very cool.
Well, yeah, you go wherever you want to go.
Well, I've found that anything Atlantean or Lemurian, just by nature, you have to get in this frame of mind and go deep, like really deep with um, the mystery of it and
Those are
the
probably my
profundity of
those
it.
are those are my favorite.
Yeah.
But please share.
Well, okay, so I'll tell the story, whether it stays in or not, I guess we'll see. When Paul and I have two daughters, and when they were, I don't know, 5 and 7 or something, we requested a family past life profile. And I mean, part of why it was a surprise to me was because I had conjured up this thing in my imagination
Yeah.
that our family would get a family past life profile, and that it would then give me a way to reach other families and other parents, and I could use it as an example, and that and that it would be maybe I don't know if practical is the right word, relatable. That's what I was like, this will be relatable.
Yeah.
Well, we have a unique family. I guess I knew that then. I really know it now. So the information that came through was a lifetime where, like, we didn't even have names, we didn't have forms. It was Lemurian, where it's, like I said, if we're going to go esoteric, let's go way back.
Yeah.
There's just, it was a different time, space, dimension. I think it was revealed that we were underwater.
Yeah.
And yet there was these identities that could be tied to us. When I started hearing the report, the past life part of it, at first, I just sat back and I was like, yeah, that is not going to really be what you lead with.
Yeah. We were sea creatures, kind of dimensional sea creature. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and when we
Yeah.
created a focal point of light and heat that has to do with identity and personal identity. And anyway, with all the reports, the past life stuff can be very distracting and very entertaining, and you can really get lost in it.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I value about these reports that we offer and that we also received over the years is that there's a significance.
Yeah.
So it's, how does this relate to that?
How are you going to use it? Yeah.
The significance was so accurate. You know, our unique family, we tend to pair up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what occurred in the past. You know, it wasn't like anybody was married or there were any children or anything. It was just like Paul sort of watched us from afar, and then he would interact with Alexandra. And then I went through a moment of like instability and received a download that then helped. And then Viviana was out there like rooting for the crowd. But you know, we weren't in the forms that we're in now. And one of the things that it talked about was that we move in pairs, which we still do.
Mm-hmm.
that still helps me because I can get into the, cultural thing of families need to eat together. We should be together more often. And honestly, if you put all four of us in the same room for too long, it's like, it doesn't work. We just, and it's not that there's any preference.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's me and Paul, sometimes it's Viviana and Alexandra, sometimes it's me and Vivi. So there's that, but there was also talk in that report about how we found the density of the physical world now cumbersome and difficult.
Yeah.
Because there's this resonant memory of not being bogged down by 21st century living.
Yeah.
And Paul will, he knows there's sometimes we just look at each other and we're like, it could be more simple than this. Why is it so?
Right. Exactly.
So that honestly, that report surprised me. That's probably more than anything.
I've used that report.
A personal report.
I've used that report many times as a touchstone for, I guess you'd call it lightening the mood in the family, but also like getting a farsightedness back established in the, if we get all bunchy about particular day-to-day issues or a school issue or something like that, I try to pop back into that far-sighted perspective of, oh, we've been here in this mixture of entities for 265,000 years or so. I think we can handle this. I think we can navigate through this little tiny issue that's on the table right now.
Has there been one, Christine, that you've heard that, back to this, you're just so intrigued with the mystery, but is there something that you ever heard from any reports that's like gave you another little drop to say, that has me thinking about things differently, or something like that?
Honestly, I think it's the field, it's the experience of intuitive reports overall. Because I can transcribe, I can listen to reports all day and never get tired of it.
Yeah.
I just, there's not even my reports. It's other people's reports. It's looking back at transcripts that started in 1968. As when I was an active member of the School of Metaphysics, I had access to all of that.
Yeah.
And it's like, it was like an anthropologist's mystical dream come true.
Well, you went through all the Atlantean reports too. You collected
I did.
them.
I was tasked with the job to go through like tens of thousands of transcripts and pull the ones that were Egyptian and Atlantean and Lemurian that then became the basis for a book that was written called Remembering Atlantis, which I still is probably my favorite book published by the School of Metaphysics.
I would agree with that. That's
because it just
there's your mysteries
right there. Right.
I, like you, there was one time when I was at the School of Metaphysics. It was during the summer, and I also was charged with organizing and a lot with the intuitive reports. And I remember a couple of things hit me while I was doing that, was how much they had changed from the beginning to where I was, and also recognizing that I remember this is how I worded it back then, was that there's something about these intuitive reports that have to do with a new revelation. Like it's, how we have in our holy texts, we've got different revelation type of stories. I just thought these are going to be the next revelation of how we understand this next iteration. And I just didn't know the form of what that was, how that was going to look, but that's all I could see. It was like another book. I saw it as another book in another text format, but
Mm.
but I also recognize that the reason some of this is my analysis. The reason that the reports had changed from the beginning to the end is you stated this earlier, that the evolution of the different people within that structure were also changing. And the reports, I mean, so a lot of change had already been occurring. And that's why, to the current place with where you are as a reporter, it's even changed. You being how you are and who you are has also changed the sound of the reports in another way as well.
It evolves.
It evolves.
You know, something we haven't talked about that I think it's good, it's important, is that the person that's requested a report receives what they're ready for at that time, maybe just a little bit ahead of themselves.
Mhm.
So when I look at my reports from early on, when I was younger, the information that came across was a little bit more simple. It was perfect for where I was. If I was to get a report now, the length is usually different.
Yeah.
The depth is different.
Yeah.
So there's a mirror in the process of who's requesting the report. Not so much who's giving it, because I think that there's that universal part. But if we have somebody that's never had an intuitive report find us and request it, and they're just maybe starting on their journey of deeper exploration, the report reflects that.
Right.
And I don't mean that in a judgmental way. I really mean it it's like an honorable way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something that we come up with.
No, I
Yeah.
think
You
Paul
know?
and I have discussed that in different episodes.
Yeah. It'll naturally present just enough, like just the next steps for you, but
Mhm.
not overload you, not over complexify things. But someone who has done a lot of research and self-awareness and self-development, and they're really in the thick of developing their consciousness and waking up and all of this, their report will be different, and it
They're
may
ready
even
to
challenge
receive it.
them.
Mhm.
It'll often challenge them a little bit more directly and
Yeah,
and more openly.
I think and I think that elevates also what love is. There's a level of respect and integrity that comes
Mhm.
through, and I think that's connected to the purity of the information being given.
Yeah.
It's just this little other nugget that you need. But yeah, you don't need more, because sometimes the reporter will say, this will not be given now,
Right.
or it won't be given
Mhm.
at this time. Or, I mean, there'll be other things that'll be said, but so as fast as we want information, there's a respect of, once you're ready to receive that, you'll be ready for it and it'll be given to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah, there's also an interesting integrity that's kind of built into it, because if somebody tries to, like, if we try to do a past life profile for somebody every week for 6 weeks in a row, and they haven't applied the information or used it,
Mhm.
I have heard in other sessions of reports where the reporter simply says, this has already been given.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I've heard that too.
That's the beginning and end of that session.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will there be any other advice or suggestions given to this one? And the reporter just says, none at this time.
Well, or just that not even another intuitive report is going to be given.
Yeah.
And I've seen that from different reporters.
Yeah.
You know, one person offered, the health analysis perhaps
Mhm.
last month, and then this month it's a different reporter.
Right.
And
Yeah.
if that individual has not used the information, it's not given.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a kind of
And
a
it's like this built-in integrity that
yeah, it's like a
Right.
built-in safety mechanism for their mind, for their it's a very compassionate um relief valve for the receiver's mind so that
or
they're
an
not
honesty
overloaded.
read. I mean, it can be tempting, and you people, myself included, can be greedy with wanting more information.
That's right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if I'm not using it, then that is greed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It needs to be used. And when I say used, I mean contemplated, applied, practiced. Just receiving the intuitive report is not going to that's not going to do the work for you
Yeah.
Mhm.
to
'Cause I
make the
think I think you
change.
can enter into these reports from a curiosity mind. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But then if it becomes a curiosity that's only intellectual,
Or
Right.
egoic.
yeah,
Um,
or
I've
egoic,
had
yeah.
people in a session, they've come in and mm, they may be expecting that they were a queen or a king, or they may even ask that in the session, like, was I a king in another lifetime? And the reporter will very diplomatically say, this one has been many things in many lifetimes. However, the report that was just given is the most significant one for you to go back to and listen to that one, really. That's the most significant right now.
Well, and Christine, I think that just goes back to you opened that up at the beginning of um, uh, these reports are very unique. The work behind them are it's unique. It's other maybe that's not even the right word because other type of quote psychic or whatever reports are also unique, but there's a flavor to and a reverence around why these reports are done in the way that they're done, prepared in the way that they're done, and given in the way that they're done. And I there's probably the distinction between others that I've heard. Not better, not worse, but very distinct about that. Well, so with that, what are your, let's see, a lot of maybe futuristic question or for the now questions. What's in the future for new reports? What I know, let's do this one. What kind of questions do you really want people to be mindful about asking or not asking? And or has there ever been funny questions that you think, oh my goodness, why did they ask that one? Because part of the
Okay.
reports is right, people get to request a report as well as ask questions.
Yeah. We'll often work with people individually to ask questions that are relative. And because unless somebody has a lot of experience, they don't necessarily know the kind of information that's going to come through. You don't ask, should I leave my husband? Should I get married? Like those sort of predictive sort of things are usually not given because there's choice. You always have choice.
Right.
I will say that the most I'm going to use the word absurd question I ever heard on a
I know
report.
what's coming. Yeah.
Yes, this was a long time ago. It was a woman that asked in a health analysis, and I was observing this session. She described in a full paragraph about how her cat got caught under the mattress in the bed and was scared and stuck. She wanted to know why the cat bit her when she
Oh my goodness.
was getting the cat out of the mattress or the situation. And it was like, though, first of all, she was very vivid in what she described. So you could see it. And it was humorous and not a relative question. I mean, obviously the cat bit her because the cat was scared. She'd answered her own question. That's really what it was. We don't usually get questions like that. But so I personally think you don't have to ask any questions.
Yeah, I
I
Yeah.
I've learned
really,
that as
and
well.
I kind of go back and forth into whether or not we should even offer it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the questions that people write up and send in, it actually helps them prepare themselves to receive the
Right,
session.
right.
That's really their preparation, is to get themselves in the frame of mind of there are going to be suggestions coming my way soon, and it gets them in a receptive state.
Mm-hmm.
Often the questions, because of that, are answered in the body of the report
Yes.
before you even get to the question.
Oh, I know.
So there's that element.
That's right.
More than once, I wrote out questions, attended a session, heard my report. I didn't even ask the questions. I was like, oh my God, was I
Yeah.
wasn't even,
Right.
not even relative, but things like, should I quit my job? When will I meet my husband or, life partner? Those kinds of questions are, they're not going to get a specific answer.
Mm-hmm.
It usually will come across in a more universal way, which
Yeah.
is, well, it's up to this, or, and
As you
so
develop
sometimes,
this, as you
yeah.
develop your consciousness towards this, or open yourself towards trusting, and it'll be much more broad an answer that comes through.
So,
Right. And so even when I've transcribed some of those and I hear questions like that, and I've had these conversations with Paul, sometimes I'll just laugh. And I know I've asked some of those myself. I mean, right, I've been there, especially earlier on. But now I've come to think it's there, even in every question, there's always going to be an answer that's going to be useful. Even
right.
even if it's to say,
This is
even if
not
it's right,
relative.
it's not relative, or this has been answered, or this is, whatever the answer is, it's still an answer that
Mhm.
hopefully will direct the person to still go a lot more deeper into themselves and to the report.
There have been many times as a conductor when I've looked at the question and I thought, this is kind of I think this has been answered already. I'll go ahead and ask it, and I'll pose the question, but the answer will be phrased in a particular way that I think, wow, what an elegant way
Yeah,
of
right.
presenting the answer, which sounds like it's tailor-made just for that person to receive a particular way. I thought, wow, I would not have answered it that way. But I think that's a way they can access the
Right.
answer better.
Right. Yeah. So
Something
I'm
I will
always in
say
that.
about
Go ahead.
questions is that inevitably, when you receive a report, your own report, questions are going to be stimulated in you.
Right.
Yes.
And spending any time, which I have, wishing I had asked about that because I wanted more, or I didn't understand it. It's a built-in mechanism for the application of the report. It's like if you have a question that comes after you receive it, part of your journey is that the answer is going to unfold for you.
Yeah.
Agreed. What do you think the impact of these intuitive reports have or will have on humanity?
Hmm. I hope that it gives somebody an experience with a deeper part of themselves that helps them tie in more to that mystery, the continuity of consciousness. I do believe so much that as humanity will evolves into an awareness of our interconnectedness with each other, that the suffering that is that we put upon each other will lessen because you have that sense, because people are more self-aware. And that's a big ask. I mean, honestly, I think we're looking at hundreds, maybe thousands of years of evolution. But right now, when it happens with one person, it makes a difference.
Yeah. I would say for every person who receives a report and senses their connectedness just a little bit, that connectedness is humanity's connectedness, because we're all part of this, the t-shirt that I want to make, which is there's only one of us here. And anytime one person goes a little bit deeper or feels a little bit more connected or is a little bit more self-aware, that automatically says that humanity is that much more deeper or more self-aware because of the connection, the intrinsic connection of everyone.
Well, we have
Yeah.
a lot of extra questions that kind of go a little bit deeper, broader. So let's play a game about this. Pick a number between 1 and 13.
3.
Oh, this is
There you go.
oh, I love it. Thoughts on creation.
Like all of creation,
Doesn't matter,
Yeah.
however you're hearing
mystical
it.
part
Yep.
of life. Okay. When I was little, after looking at the stars or falling off the bed, looking at the
Yes.
moon,
Yes.
I would lay in bed. And the way I would try to go to sleep is I would try to think of everything in the world that was happening at the same time.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
It links to infinity for me. My thoughts
Yeah.
on creation are very, very related to infinity.
Mm.
I would also try to get to the edge of the universe.
Oh,
Like I would
Wow.
go out, I would just try to get to the edge, and I never did. And I still haven't.
yeah.
But I think my thoughts on creation are infinite. It's infinity. Which ties in with our topic today, honestly, because you could call it a past life experience. However, that energetic resonance exists now.
Right.
And it's being tapped into and articulated in the present moment. Where are we go? Even the future is an energetic signature that exists now. And boy, I can spend a lot of time just contemplating it, whether I'm sitting outside, sitting in our neighbor's hot tub, I've got a cat on my lap purring. I just love nothing more than that, the infinity of the present moment. And somehow it has been created.
Mm.
And I don't know the answer to that yet.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
I'm going to jump in with one last question here, which is, what is your vision for the future, like for humanity? What do you see coming? What do you think is coming?
Well, I tend to see lines of probability rather than possibility. So the probability is that I see and I sense is we have a bit of a journey that we are in and that will continue that has to do with suffering. That trying to get away from suffering is everybody has a personal journey with that every day. There's different levels of it.
Mhm.
The more honest you can be with yourself when you're uncomfortable, the more finesse you will have with responding rather than reacting.
Hmm.
And that down the road, there will be a lightness that humanity can exhibit. It really does have to do with what the masters have taught through time and space. That's the love, the respect of everything, of nature, of all of creation. Other than that, I don't I don't see it yet. I think part of it is we don't know how we're going to get there. We don't know yet. We are creating our future right now, and there are different avenues.
Mhm.
Might not be on this planet. My future might not be on this planet. It might not be in this star system.
Mm.
Yeah, you know better, Paul, than to ask me about the future. I'm not, I don't know.
I just thought I could
You thought you'd
coax some
try.
more out of you. Yeah.
No.
Well, we just jumped into the future. So even when you asked that question, you went into the future,
Yeah.
or we were already there, right? This whole
I like how
crazy.
you said it's probability, not possibility.
That's right.
Yeah. Because we are causing it.
Well, an infinity of the present moment. I mean, that I wrote that down. That's going to be my tagline for a little bit.
Yeah. And what I wrote down from that when you were saying it is the journey with infinity, our journey with infinity. What's it, wherever that goes, but it's one step at a time, one thought at a time. Do you have one or two or three or nothing? But what are someone's listening? They're going to say, "Gosh, Christine, what's one thing that you'd ask me to do today to help me be a better person?"
Like a would suggest.
I would suggest.
Would
Oh,
suggest
a
for this one.
conscious would suggest.
Yeah.
Trust yourself.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Wow. This has been cool. I
This
really
has been
like this.
So I did too.
Yeah. We're gonna have to have you on again at some point
Mhm.
and just keep touching base with you and with the source of these intuitive reports. All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on Once Upon a Quantum Leap and leaping with us here.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Many blessings.
You as well.
Once Upon a Quantum Leap is for your reference only. This podcast and the material is intended solely as educational information and should not be used for diagnosis or treatment of any health problem, financial, or legal advice.
You can listen to full episodes and find out about Paul and Capucine at onceuponaquantumleap.com. All reports shared on this show have been released with permission, and identifiers have been removed for individuals' privacy.
The intuitive reports referred to in each episode are available on our website, on the podcast page, and through links in our show notes. We encourage you to listen to those for greater context.
If you're interested in obtaining your own intuitive report, go to quantuminsight.co. That's quantuminsight.co. You can listen to us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.